So remember I contacted you and I was like, oh, I just watched A, B, and C. I watched your video that you were talking about the idea of these trans exclusive spaces, and I was just like, because I didn't even know this was a conversation. And I guess that's partly due to me kind of hiding from the internet, other than one, two scrolls on Instagram sometimes. But also, I didn't think that that would be a conversation in 2020, if that makes sense. It's a conversation that I expected maybe when people were still trying to figure out what trans was, if that makes sense. That's the kind of conversation I'd expect from that level of kind of discovery and trying to understand, and it becoming something that was mainstream, and the same way that people were struggling to understand what queer was in the Black community, like, oh no. And at least if I talk about it from here, the kind of ingrained kind of homophobia that exists because of religion, because of culture, and it's like, oh, bun, chichi man, and all this kind of stuff. There was a transition where people were like, oh no, this actually exists, and it has always existed in our communities. And so therefore it isn't something, not to say that homophobia doesn't still exist, but there's been a transition in understanding, right, from the older generation to the younger generation, and people kind of being like, okay, this is something that exists, and we're not openly, at least, allowed to say certain things and discriminate in certain ways. Someone might call us out. We might be seen as bigoted. We might be seen as, and so in that early stage, that's where I expected this kind of conversation to come up, but not in a forum where we are talking about Black people who, and I don't want to say should know better, because there's no such thing, right? Like, we all are learning, we are all on a journey, we are all trying to get somewhere. But I want to also use the phrase should know better, right? Because these are spaces that anyway, I don't want to take up all of the, but that's where I was. This is literally how my brain was working. I don't understand. That's literally what was happening. And it you know, and it kind of made me think about the way in which, you know, how I met you, and that whole, the parallels between experiences and the exclusion and the silencing and the kind of not recognizing being part of a whole, and not recognizing the discrimination that we experience, not recognizing the cultural implications of us being excluded as well, and those types of things. Oh, Jumoke's here. But that it made me think about that, and I was like, look, if we're talking about trans exclusive spaces, hey Jumoke, then
hey, sorry, I literally just finished, so I need to get onto it on my phone as well. Nice to meet you.
It's okay. I was just explaining to Diamond why we decided we were going to have this conversation. But yeah, so it made me think about the way in which if trans women aren't included, and we're considering excluding trans women from women's spaces, then we're also considering excluding disabled women from women's spaces, because they're not mentioned at all either. And what about trans disabled women and all of those types of things? Because it becomes a mess. And especially when you're talking about Blackness, like you can't. And
becomes
so
arbitrary, because you are creating these lines of what is a woman and what isn't a woman, and you know, if you say, oh, you're not a woman because you can't make babies, then what about the cisgender women who can't make babies?
Yeah.
What, you know, what's the line? What's the you know, why? It just feels kind of strange. And yes, I get what you're saying. It seems, I think it's because we might be in a bubble, Kim.
Sorry.
We might be in a bubble. And I know, and sometimes because we are engaging in these conversations. I know me particularly because I'm always engaging in trans conversations. sometimes I think, okay, I had this conversation 10 years ago and we are still here. And in this particular case, you know, somebody had, you know, a popular YouTuber had two trans women on her show, Kim Foster. And so when she had the person on the show, everybody who wanted to be, you know, wanted to respond to it. And so it just bubbled up these, the shade, the people who might normally be quiet, they, you know, they bubbled them up. And so the people who are anti-trans, you know, they all released videos, and it was like, wow, oh, okay, because of her platform.
And so I guess the question that I have initially is, where did this particular conversation come from? Where did that erupt from? What was the spark for somebody to suddenly be like, well, actually, what we need is Black women's space that doesn't include all Black women?
So it started with Kim Foster's. She had two trans women on her show. What Kim is known to do is, you know, she is a Black feminist. She includes trans people in her feminism, and she uses her platform, like all of us who are social media influencers do. We bring people on who are experts of that particular subject. And so she brought two trans people on her show, and just the nature of YouTube, people responded to it, other people with platforms. And so it sparked Tanya TKO, it sparked this girl named Yanni, it sparked Chrissy, and it just was this battle where they attacked Kim. And, you know, then it led to trans people coming in and saying, people tagging me and saying, oh, come listen to this live. And I'm like, oh, y'all are really tagging me in this level of toxicity. This isn't just, oh, a nice debate and good conversation. This is toxic. Like y'all pulled me into this conversation where I'm being literally called a man. And I'm like, I don't really want to be in this space. And so I made my own video about it, and, you know, that's how the conversation sparked. And so, but this isn't a new conversation. You know, I've heard this. It's just, you know, it's just a new rev up of a conversation.
And, you know, I think sometimes people don't realize how damaging this type of conversation is. So I know today I was looking at the comment section of a post about the 3 women in Hollywood who were attacked. I think it's either yesterday or the day before.
Yesterday, yeah.
And I was just looking at the comment section, and the kinds of comments, you know, are, you know, you're 3 men, you can defend yourselves, and all this kind of stuff. These kind of conversations about excluding women from women's spaces reinforces these ideas and actually has this effect, right? And then it's also this departure from logic, because we understand fundamentally that anyone getting jumped and robbed is a bad thing. It's a horrific thing and it shouldn't happen to anyone. But in the case of women who are trans, it's suddenly okay for people to be jumped and robbed all of a sudden. But not only is it okay for people to be jumped and robbed, the idea that they're supposedly associated with being male means that they should be able to prevent themselves from having this thing happen to them. But then what about all of the men who actually get jumped and robbed? Why do we not have the same energy? And so it's like this departure from logic that is reinforced by this kind of discourse. And then I was thinking, you know, Diamond, I was like, the kind of hatred that folks, especially cis men, have for Black trans women, it's almost like a manifestation of the physical manifestation and sanctioned manifestation of the hate they have for Black women in general, right? They think that it's okay because society is co-signing it, that they enact that physically upon trans women because, oh no, it's okay because they're not really women, therefore I will not be seen as socially in this particular way that is associated with people who brutalize women, right? But it's almost like, and I guess for me, I was just like, right, people don't realize that actually this is, it doesn't stop here. I was watching one of your videos and you were talking about the stats for domestic violence and sexual abuse, right? For trans women, for Black trans women and Black women. I find it, one of the issues that I'm having is with my language, because for me, I don't see trans women as not women. So it's having to state that every time, for me, creates this divide that I don't feel exists, right? So you'll hear me pause before I say trans, because I just want to say women. But that in itself, that statistic in terms of knowing that we experience extremely high levels of domestic violence and sexual abuse at the hands of Black men, at the hands of our families, at the hands of people who know us and are intimately involved with us, not from some the guy outside who is part of the system that we say that we want to dismantle and is, it's from the people.
Not the white man, not the white man, not the white woman, not the Klansman, literally who we march for, who we actually stand up for when the white man is against them, who we create movements for, who we fight for, like the men who are in our homes, who we cook, who we nurture, who we care for when the world is beating them up, the men who we actually put our bodies and sacrifice our time and have to therapize when they are dealing with the world. This is who we and cisgender women who had them on their breast, who they raised, and it's for me it's a ridiculous kind of twisted joke, because there has been many times that I have put my life on the line for Black men, not just Black men who I am related to, but Black men who I see who are in situations. And I'm like, I've seen people get jumped on. I've seen people who were attacked, who were unfairly, something has happened to them unfair. And I come in and I say, yo, this is not right. This is not okay. But at the same time, knowing that this same person would not turn around and do the same thing for me. If I'm jumped, just like those girls in Hollywood, if I'm jumped, they're going to pull out their cameras. They're going to record. They're going to say, oh my God, you're a man. You should be able to fight. Like, I've been fucking playing football all my life. No, I transitioned when I was 13. I don't have the same capacity of strength as you. It's just different. And so the same people who I would care for, who I have literally been in the streets. I've been in the streets at a march for Black Lives Matter, and I was called a faggot at the march. At the march. And so for me, it's just a weird joke. I just don't understand it. And I feel like, I think it's the intersection of the hate for anything femme, and really the hate for seeing somebody buck up against the system that they hate. I know men it has to be tiresome. It has to be exhausting for them to have to live up to this level of masculinity that is not healthy for them. It has to be exhausting for them to see somebody who totally bucks the system. I mean, totally. Totally say, fuck that shit y'all talking. I'm doing something else, something new, something fresh, creating my own self, my own being. It has to be frustrating to see somebody who is that strong, who is that powerful to say, fuck that shit y'all talking about. I'm not dealing with it. And there has to be a level of frustration. And so I need to put you in your place. So not only I'm culturally bred to hate femmes outside of sex. I'm totally bred to objectify femmes and abuse them, bred to do that. But I'm also bred to also put other men back in their place when they get out of their place. So I think what we are experiencing is the intersection of those two things. If you're a man in my mind, I'm going to put you back in your place. I'm going to show you you're a man, you need to be tough, and I'm going to treat you like a man. But also, if I'm looking at you as a femme thing, not just a woman, but anything femme, I need to control you and put you in your place as well. I think it's the intersection of both of those things.
I was watching a talk on the Grapevine, and Hope Giselle, I think she's Hope Disguised on Instagram, was talking about the idea that, you know, folks think that Black trans women have lots of rights and lots of trans rights. And it was just like, no, racism, Blackness cuts across everything. And that's something that we talk about, Triple Cripples talks about in terms of Blackness and disability, right? So we talk about disability cutting across everything, in the sense that it doesn't, you know, your color, your gender orientation, all that kind of stuff. Anyone can be disabled, right?
Yeah, anyone can get white supremacy. Anyone can get white supremacy. Anyone can get the.
Anyone can get it. Like, these hands are you for universal.
Right.
And so it's an interesting thing, like the perception that somehow, because rights exist somewhere, that somehow your Blackness doesn't preclude you from them. And so I think what I want to ask, or I'd like us to kind of unpick, is, okay, what does, if we were in the ideal world of those who would like it, what does a cis exclusive space look like, and what does a trans exclusive space look like, and is there room for either of those, and why would they be needed? What specifically would they be needed to tackle? Because I think if we're going to say, okay, you know, we want a trans exclusive space where trans women aren't there, as you said in your video, Diamond, you know, sometimes I want to talk to trans women. There will be times when I would like to talk to trans women about particular issues. So what does that space look like? And is it a space that is for particular causes, or is it a space that just exists because we can have spaces like that? And is it a space that is an exclusive space, but for the purposes of exclusion rather than the purposes of delegitimization? And I think that's what perhaps makes a difference. It's like me saying, okay, we want a space for disabled women. What does that look like? You know, and for me, at least from where I'm sitting, most of the only spaces that I can think of for a disabled woman, I don't know, Jamie, maybe you can think of something different, but for me, it would be a space where, okay, maybe we are talking about some of the particular experiences that come from within and without the community for being Black disabled women. I would not have an exclusive space with non-Black disabled people, first of all, because we do not share an experience in a lot of ways. Yes, we may be disabled, but my Blackness, my womanhood cut across that and define the experience of disability, right? And so that's the only, if we were working on maybe trying to campaign to change certain things for disabled Black women, it definitely could not be a disabled exclusive space, because we're not the ones in the seat of power. We're not the ones who are out there making life miserable for us. We need everyone to be there.
So let me say this. So this is how I think, because I'm an organizer, you know, I think about organizing.
Yeah.
So in my mind, sometimes in the process of us figuring out what we need, let me get in the space with my community to see what's going on and see what we need. I might need a space where it is trans only, so that I'm not in a space where I have to teach people what's going on. Yeah. If everybody is trans in this space, I don't have to start at a 101 and explaining and blah, 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 blah. We already know what's up. So, hey, what do we need? And sometimes this group, this session, this one particular exclusively trans session is about making the moves. What are our demands? What do we want? What do we need? Let's figure this out. Now, once we figure those things out, I'm going to include other people who have power, who can get us these demands. So sometimes that first session is really just about us figuring out collectively, of our particular group of what we need and what we want. It might be something that I can't think of all on my own. So I'm bringing my people together so we can figure it out. And then we say, okay, in our exclusive group, this is what we figured out, what we need and what we need demands. So let me bring other people in, the people who have power, our allies, our people, you know, somebody who may share overlapped experience with us. Come on in. This is what we particularly need. How can we help you? How can you help us? Blah, blah, blah. And it becomes a negotiation.
So then is it kind of a way to leverage each other's power?
Exactly. Yeah. And we can figure it out. So, and really, that's what it is. It's about, I don't have to educate in the beginning when I'm first organizing. When I want to expand, absolutely. I want to bring people who have a little bit more power, or who have another type of power, who have another type of access. I want to bring everybody in when I'm trying to get these demands. But sometimes in the space of trauma, when I'm trying to figure it out, I don't need to be a teacher in that moment. I don't need to be a... have to navigate the space of, oh my God, this is cis and trans people. And then when then it's going to insert other conversations that we don't need to have right now, because the goal is to figure out what these trans people need. And sometimes
you don't have to hold somebody else's hand.
Exactly. And sometimes I think that is appropriate with cisgender women, I particularly around childbirth. I'm not going to sit into a space where we're talking about getting over the trauma of a miscarriage in regards to reproductive justice, getting over the trauma of a abortion, after, so many things that I will never experience. I'm not going to want to sit in that space. But if somebody said, I want a space specifically for cis women who have experienced this particular thing, and I want it to be exclusive, I don't want trans folks in it, to me, and I don't think that is, I don't want trans people in it because y'all are not women. I want people who experience this thing. Once we get this worked out, so we don't have to worry about, you being included. We don't have to worry about identity in that regard. We just worried about who have experienced this. What do we need? What do we need to heal this trauma? How do we fight this particular thing? Whatever the issue may be, I think I wouldn't have a problem with that. But like you said, it's when they try to make it just to be exclusive, just for exclusive sake. That's the problem. When you're invalidating. Yeah. But go ahead. Yeah.
I was going to say, even in that space that you're talking about, what about trans men who have wombs and may have had miscarriages or may carry children?
They would let them in, actually.
They wouldn't let them in?
They would.
Okay. Oh, they would let them into those spaces?
Yes.
Okay, that's good. No, because for me, it's like when that's the way my perception of this exclusive cis woman exclusive space isn't one that recognizes that trans men exist, right? The way it's spoken about.
Not. But I've been in a space where they wanted it to be exclusive to cis women, and the trans men were like, we can have babies too, and so what's up? And they were like, oh yeah, true, come on.
Your face, I mean, okay, I guess.
Okay,
I guess, come on through.
Like, pull out some chairs.
And then they start using the language, but even in that space, it becomes toxic to them, because then they start using language. Well, you can have a baby because you're really a woman. You get what I'm saying? It becomes toxic, and that doesn't feel safe for a trans guy who's exploring having children. So that's a whole other topic. But I think exclusivity can be done in a way that is healthy. And I think as a person who has been in spaces where I didn't want to explain to white people racism 101, and they made the situation, oh, this just needs to be black people. This just need to. I don't mind that, and I don't mind people having exclusive spaces, but I don't want it to be exclusive because you don't think I'm a woman, and in things that we have overlapping oppression. So if we're talking about domestic violence, if we're talking about housing issues, we all are going through that same stuff together, baby. So that's not. I don't think that should be something that we should be talking about that is exclusive to trans or cis. Like, that's something we all
together.
So, yeah.
And I agree. I think that's an important point. And I think the idea that these things can't happen in tandem is what my issue becomes. One of the points that was made, I think, in one of the videos you played in your video was the idea that we need to deal with our stuff first and then we can bring you along, which is the black man narrative, right? Which is kind of like, oh, you know, let's deal with the emasculation of the black man, and when we finish with that, then we'll deal with beating you guys up. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's the whole kind of thing.
My friend, don't say it like that.
Does that ever work? Did that work with the white women that put us when in the context of America, when we were fighting for suffrage and they put the black women on the back of the line? It didn't work then. It
didn't work. We should be celebrating in 2065, apparently, for women's suffrage, but that's another story.
Right.
And that's the thing. I think all of these things can happen in tandem, and the idea that somehow it is in direct opposition to an agenda that is for Black liberation is a problem. And I think that in itself needs to be called out, because the same thing could be said when we're talking about disabled issues. When I've been in situations, I've been in conversations where we're talking about Black issues, and I've brought up disabled issues, and the comment is, we need to deal with this first, because right now this is more important. Then we can talk about that. And it's almost like sometimes they see disability as a white person's issue. And so it's like, as a Black person, you're not supposed to express that you're experiencing discrimination or it within your own community because of your disability, but also you're not supposed to name the disability. You're not supposed to name how you're disempowered by society. You're not supposed to name the fact that this thing exists, because somehow that even naming it is in opposition to liberation, because it isn't Black excellence, right? Like, you're not the Black excellent person who's a bank manager, who the bank has screwed over. Like, you're not that guy. You're somebody who doesn't represent the best of us. And so your needs,
you're broken.
Yes, your needs will always be on the back burner, because you're actually a spanner in the works for what we're trying to do. When we're trying to present our needs to the white man and let him see us as worthy of liberation, and when we're begging him, like, you're not the face of the campaign. And so we need people and we need a movement that represents who we want to be seen as. And it makes me think about, the comments that Toni Morrison makes about the white gaze, because that is what it is. Like, if we weren't so concerned with how we were perceived by whiteness, and the idea that we need to present this image to whiteness that's palatable enough for them to believe that we deserve humanity, for them to believe that we deserve not to die, for them to believe all of these things, our main concern would be the people most marginalized in our community. And they wouldn't be marginalized, they'd be the most protected, because we're taught in every other area of life that you're supposed to protect the weak and so-called vulnerable. You're supposed to protect people with idiosyncrasies. You're supposed to value them and see them as special and as wonderful. Even the idea, even behind art, we see artists, oh yeah, they're quirky. This idea of the crazy artist who's disorganized and, doesn't do anything right and cuts off their ear and mails it to people. Like, we are supposed to see that as exceptionalism, right? It's exceptional and wonderful. But somehow, when it comes to our own community and humans within it, we do not have the same moral guidance because of the white gaze, right? And so I guess it's frustrating to hear these conversations. Obviously, this conversation will not be had about the disabled Black community just because no one kind of gives a fuck about us. So it's just like, there is no, whether you're trans, not trans, whatever, like, most of the time you're not included in any of these conversations. Your needs, when they're talking even reproductive justice, we're not included, despite the fact that some of us have wombs. We're not included when you're talking about police brutality, despite the fact that I think it's between 20 and more than 40%, because they don't have accurate data, of people that end up getting brutalized by police, not just in America, but here, are people with disabilities. That doesn't, Black people I'm talking about, and that doesn't get spoken about. Like disability is erased in a way that is, it's actually quite, it's disturbing in a way. And it reminds me when we were watching, I watched Disclosure, and I was just like, just tears. I was just like, oh my God. Because they were talking about representation, right? And I was like, rah. You know, I was thinking of the images of trans people in film. Forget the fact that, you know, Black trans people weren't represented until they started representing them as sex workers, and that's literally all we can be. I was thinking, if we were to apply the same kind of idea about where people get their ideas about disability from and Black disability from, like, I don't know that we could make a documentary. I don't know that there would be any real point of reference for that, other than if we were going to talk about slavery. And then we'd be like, yeah, well, so 99% of the slaves were disabled, and either forcibly so or due to occupational hazards. The end. That would be it for the most part. Like, there wouldn't really be.
Yeah, it's just following on to what you were saying about the fact, and this is definitely something that we've discussed on the platform before, but, you know, Black disability showing up and a visible disability. So when you have the mobility equipment, the crutches, the wheelchair, whatever, it is quite literally the antithesis to Black excellence. So it's a case of, don't worry, once we get these particular sets of Black people free, then we'll get to you. You can tell that it's disingenuous. You can tell that it's a lie, because I don't even count you. So you will never, ever be included. You're not at the back of the line. You've been completely erased.
Mm.
Literally erased. Literally.
Yeah. I don't know. Diamond, did you watch Disclosure? Have you watched it?
So I think that it will be, yes, I watched it and I loved it. And I think and I'm thinking in the context of disability, I think it might be the same. Because if I look at film with disabilities depicted, it is always some kind of laughing reel. Like when I was younger, it was always something like, remember in Living Color and Handyman? Yeah. I think when I think of Black disabilities, I remember him. He was a Black character with disabilities in Living Color, and that was a comedy show. You know, but there were white ones who it was the same thing. So I think that they could mirror Disclosure in a sense of how, you know, of how they I'm picturing things in sitcoms, and I'm like, it's always to be funny. It's never a serious conversation. It's never, you know, when I was younger. Now as we getting older, I remember there was a deaf actress that it was a big deal that she was playing a character on, I can't remember the show. There was
that's white woman.
But she was a white woman.
Yeah. I can't remember her name, but I can see her face.
But she has glasses.
Yeah.
Her. I just remember just things kind of popping up, just popping up random times. But I think that I only remember one Black one. I literally only remember one Black one that wasn't some kind of random victim, like in a series where they're disabled and they're really just a prop. They're just like, this evil person is coming and getting them, and they're set up to be this. We're just supposed to see them as a sympathetic character. They're not made to be a fighter. They're not made to be strong. We don't even get any kind of storyline. It's just like, oh my God, this killer is about to do something crazy to this disabled person. Oh my gosh. It's always set up like that.
But I will say, following on from watching Disclosure, I can't remember who had mentioned it, talking about how the very existence of a trans character, and then when we think of disability as well, is to push the narrative forward, to make the main person, the main characters, actually have to overcome their bigotry, overcome their queer phobia, overcome their ableism. It's like, wow, you're trans and you're actually a person. Wow, you're disabled and actually a person. And then once you have fulfilled that particular role, you're never seen or heard from again. And you're just like cripple number 3, you know?
Absolutely.
The only kind of modern day example I can think of seeing lots of disabled people or perceived disabled people on TV would be reality shows. And
the Little Women, Atlanta.
Little Women, or even is it Misfits? The thing, Undateables over here.
Do you have that in the US?
There's a show called The Undateables that's full of disabled people, and it's apparently that it's them trying to date.
Oh wow!
Because it's the name in itself is problematic. The idea, the framing of it is problematic. And that's where you might see some disabled Black people. I don't know how many disabled Black men are on them. I don't know any of that stuff, but that would be kind of the most, I guess, commercial example of seeing disabled people on TV in modern times, in the UK at least. And other than that, as you said, it is it's a point of laughter, it's a point of embarrassment. Or the other way you see disabled people or disabled Black people would be in charity adverts as needing someone from afar.
As a token.
And to make people feel like they are good people. There was a music video a few years ago where somebody had a disabled man in their video as a love interest. It was a white disabled man. If you type in the hashtag 100 out of 100 or something like that, it's to do with disabled love and couples, and something some talk show host said in America about 100% of romances between disabled people who, one, it requires care, they break down, or something like that. It was something ridiculous. And so people were like, oh no, let me post me and my partner. And almost 100% of all the pictures that were posted were white disabled people who had a love interest. And most of them, where there was an interracial aspect to it, because I only saw one Black couple. I scrolled through hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of images, and I only saw one Black couple, male and female. But of all of the ones that were saw, if we're talking about the interracial ones, it was always a Black man with a white woman. I think there was one Black woman with a white guy that I saw, but there were quite a few Black men with white women. But in terms of Black people, it was just non-existent. And mostly it was women who were paired with men who had disabilities, women who were paired with men with disabilities. And it plays into patriarchy, right? The idea that as a man in a society, it doesn't matter what situation you find yourself in, whether you fit beauty standards or not, whether you fit capitalist gain standards or not, whether you fit body typical standards or not, whether you're neurotypical, you should always be able to be deserving of love, not only love, but acceptance. Whereas as a femme, as a woman, no, and definitely not as a Black woman. And so
everything that we talk about culturally, the problems that we talked about interpersonally with Black men, with white women, with white men, blah, blah, blah. The further you are on the margin is the more acute those things are so obvious. The more acute those things are, just like, oh, wow. Like we really see the difference. I think recently we were talking about, there is a show called Black Love that Oprah
yes, that's the one that I linked Kim to.
Yes.
And it was nothing but light-skinned girls with the celebrity men, blah 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 blah. Those things they notice. But when you come to a little bit further down the down the social hierarchy, things get even more stark when it comes to us and when it comes to dating. And I think one of the things that is overlapping with us is that we are seen as a trans person and a disabled person. I feel like we are not seen as a perk. We are not seen. We're seen as a. We're not seen as an asset. We are seen as something that nobody is getting social capita for dating
God.
us.
Yeah. I wrote this down. This is one of the notes I wrote. This is so I wrote there's shame stroke stigma associated with those that find themselves attracted to disabled women and trans women. We're seen as grotesque, so how could anyone possibly be attracted to either group? And for both trans women and disabled women, there is a fixation and preoccupation with what lies between our legs and whether or not it works.
It works.
Yeah, and what you're saying is correct. Like that idea of not being seen as a perk, you're seen as it's not, you're not the perk. The person who is with you is a good person. That is, or they're an understanding person, or they're
oh my God, you actually date a trans person? Oh my
you're
God,
so open-minded.
date a disabled person, and not only that, like if they like us, they automatically assume, oh, you a freak. You know,
like you're into some weird shit.
You're right. You must be into this kind of weird shit. And it can't be serious. And that also allows men, particularly, since I'm sure somebody else maybe, but I date men. So with men, it allows them to go along with the idea that, oh, well, I know everybody, based on what people are responding when I tell them that I like it, or I hear how they respond, I know that I can treat you any kind of way. I can objectify you. This is the norm, because everybody is teaching
nobody cares about
that this is the norm. Nobody cares about you. Nobody values you. And they can internalize that in the same way that we can internalize it.
Yeah. And then those same messages, if you're talking about them on a public forum, which people do, and they say all sorts of stuff about disabled people in the same ways that they talk about trans people. And they talk about disabled people in a way that's like they're not people kind of thing, in the same way they talk about
literally not kind of thing, like literally you are not people.
Like it's like they don't, and often we're excluded from that conversation. But when they do talk about us, it's in this kind of abstract way as a concept, as opposed to an actual living, breathing being thing. What happens then is, as you said, it reinforces those ideas. Even if someone didn't perceive you in that way when they encountered you, because of the social environment we exist in, we are not islands. We are affected by the opinions of others. We're affected by the mood that happens when we go into a room. We're affected by the gazes and the stares and all of those things. We're affected by the way the person we are with is treated and regarded. And we notice the differences between how they are treated and how other people we've encountered or we've dealt with have been treated. It takes a different level of resistance to society to be able to ignore all of that and still maintain your usual status quo. Most people are affected. Most people are affected. It doesn't just affect them on a kind of conscious level, it's a subconscious level, because even, as you said, the way they will deal with you, even in your interpersonal sometimes, is heavily affected. The things that they will expect of you go beyond what they would usually expect. The things they'll expect you to tolerate go beyond what they'd expect anyone else to tolerate. Because deep down, thank you. Go on, Jimmy.
It's just because we exist in bodies and we exist in forms that are not to be loved, right? We exist in forms and we experience lives and we go through life in a way that is to be tolerated. So they will get gold stars for being with us. They will get gold stars for even talking to us, for even daring to be associated with us. So now what this, of course, leads to is when you get a complete lack of representation within the media, or the kind of representation in the media that sees you as the grotesque, that sees you as the joke, that sees you as something that is vomit-inducing, is the fact that they have had to come a heck of a long way to be with you. It's not a case of you meeting them halfway and them meeting you halfway. It's the fact that they have done so much, that they have sacrificed so much, that any little thing that they bring to you and any form in which that they come to you, you must be grateful for, because how can a person like you be loved? You cannot. It's like the mere fact that you're even alive and not an abstract concept is bewildering. So for somebody to accept that, they must be on their way to sainthood, whereas they don't know that behind closed doors, you are being abused verbally, physically, financially, like you are being neglected, and they won't care because you do not matter.
Yeah. And just even the stats, we were talking about stats earlier of, you know, domestic violence and sexual abuse. Like for disabled women, they are exponentially like 5 times higher.
Yes.
And so, but that in itself is a
Nobody cares. Nobody cares.
Nobody gives a fuck. Like, no, but you should be grateful that someone even wants to abuse you, my G. Like,
yeah. It's like they let their fist touch your face. Wow.
Thank you. Know your place. So it brings me to questioning then, when we, and this is something I think of a lot. Do these rigid gender binaries, and this idea of being a woman and real woman and femininity and all of those things, these ideas, these gender binaries, do they influence our experiences, right? So in my mind, in a world where gender binaries, these rigid gender binaries don't exist, it makes it then more difficult for you to discriminate against femmes in particular. It makes it more difficult for you to even, and when I say discriminate, I don't just mean, oh, you know, people don't like femmes. What I mean is this idea of what woman is, this idea of what womanhood looks like, even in terms of beauty standards and all those things, this idea of how women should be treated or how they shouldn't be treated, what women know, what they don't know. If we didn't live, I guess what I'm asking is how patriarchy influences our perception of womanhood and gender, and perhaps if the gender binary weren't so rigid and it didn't exist, would we be able to be in a place where we wouldn't have to be having these conversations?
Absolutely. Dismantling the gender binary, even just on my, just me, particularly as a trans person, if the binary did not exist, there is certain things that I would not have experienced as a trans person, because I could have just freely just done whatever I wanted to and lived. I didn't have to be passable. I didn't have to have my hair a certain way. I didn't have to have my body a certain way. I could have just lived how I wanted to live, and everybody could just live how they want to live and be comfortable in the skin that they're in and their body. And, you know, transness, I'm from an old guard. So, you know, it's rooted in the binary. I'm a binary trans woman. But this younger generation, younger than me, are coming up and shaking even what our old school trans people thought, and giving us more room to expand our minds and expand how we express ourselves. When I think about, it's always from a male gaze. So think about it. When you are, if you're a woman, cisgender woman who can have children, you're like, you know, you're not a real woman unless you have a family.
Yeah. You're not a woman until you've given birth, until you've had your period.
Then it goes down. You're not a real woman until you have a child. But then it goes down. Oh, you're not a real woman until you have a period. And then it goes down. And it just keeps going further and further down. And it just doesn't, and it's all about your connection to a man fucking you, what you can produce for a man, what your body can do for a man, what you being, not knowing that you being a nurturer of this family. It's all about these rules of what womanhood looks like and how you perform in it. I feel like we would be free if these things were dismantled, and we cannot even fathom the concept or the imagination to think of how beautiful it would be if we had to dismantle these things. We're too busy thinking about these small things. Oh, why we want cisgender spaces, we want transgender spaces, we're too busy thinking about that to think about if we bust this thing wide open, how free people can be in the world. Our children, even men. Like, even men, not just us. Like,
especially men, not even. Especially.
Like, y'all don't get tired of everything y'all do being police and, oh, you gay. Oh, you did it. Like, you don't get tired of that shit. You can't wear what you want to wear, say what you want to say, get your ass ate, get pleasure.
That's the last
you can't even get pleasure in various ways with a cisgender woman without being called gay.
You can't even be in your own space by yourself and express your emotions with yourself and feel comfortable.
Apparently wiping your butt is gay too. Like hygiene is gay, and it's just kind of at some point you must stop. But I will say
it gets to a point where you have to understand that this benefits everybody, and not investing in it really just upholds these rules that are rooted in patriarchal white supremacy. It is just because they have the power, it's gonna always point to them. I'm sorry. I know people always act like, oh Lord, y'all making everything about race. That's because race is in every single thing. And patriarchy is in every single thing. It affects all of us. And if you don't live up to masculinity in a certain way, you are going to be, you're not going to be able to be free. You're not going to be able to have the liberation that you deserve. And same thing with womanhood. If you don't live up to womanhood a certain way, look a certain way, certain level, even us as Black women, we don't have access to the social capital that white femininity gives them. We just don't. We don't have access to the doors. We don't have access to the opportunities. We don't have, all of us.
And that's the thing. And a lot of it is, even if we're just looking at the way we look, right? A lot of it is weighted in that. A lot of it is weighted in our color proximity, our phenotype, our hair type, you know, where we are, where we're based. People, and you know, people be like, oh no, but if you have money, and it's just like, you cannot see far. There's an expression we say, you can't see far. When you're saying things like that, you aren't really looking at the core of the issue. And I think about this, the reason why I thought about the gender binary actually is because I was thinking about disability and womanhood. And would disability as a Black woman be viewed in a particular way if gender binary didn't have womanhood in this tiny little box? Would I have to declare or keep trying to define what womanhood is for me? Would I have to try and prove my womanhood constantly to people if there wasn't a blueprint for what womanhood's supposed to be, right? As a fat, Black, dark-skinned woman, I don't fit with broad features that are like very African. Like there is no space for me in that box of womanhood that's been created by a gender binary, by a white supremacist gender binary. I don't even know if a gender binary would look like this if it was Black supremacist, if that could ever exist. Do you know what I mean? Like, what would that look like? And so it's like, if this thing didn't exist, what would the world look like for people like me? Sometimes, and I have to think, and I was really thinking about the ways that I present myself to the world. Often, I find myself hyper-feminizing the way I look in order to allow the world to see me as I am, as opposed to who they define me to be because of the situation that they see me in.
What? You sound like a trans woman.
When I say this thing made me cry, and I did draw the parallel, I was like, this actually makes sense for trans women as well. Like, and when I think about, you know, I remember watching Paris is Burning ages ago, and I remember watching it and being like, oh, this is so amazing. And then thinking about the portrayals of womanhood, right? And thinking of people referencing, you know, their moms, their aunts, their cousins, like, and looking at Black women and kind of taking that and being like, no, I'm going to do that. I'm not just going to do it, I'm going to do it. And kind of that idea of presenting womanhood. This is womanhood, right? And this idea that, and even the idea that trans women have to be so on point all the time. Like, non-trans women, cis women, very rarely have to have that standard 100% of the time. And you see, most of the time you see a trans woman, you see a cis woman, you know which one is cis because they do not look like they've been put together by a designer.
Let me just go ahead and hide my non-makeup face, just chilling here in my robe, being all cis and shit.
But
it's absolutely true. Like what you're saying, Kim, because I feel like if there's a special occasion, if I'm going to a wedding or whatever, then, you know, I'll dress up to the nines. But most times you'll see me without makeup. Like I don't do my nails. I don't do all of these things that we associate with femininity, but it's because I do not have to present in a certain way because I just am. But now we are, as Kim rightly said, we have such this tiny box that unless those of us that don't look the part are presenting, having the long, beautiful flowing hair, the makeup, the nails, the everything, your bras and your
the body, the everything, the
body,
walk,
the everything, the shape, the smell, you've got the perfumes, you've got the skin, you've got the soft skin, you've got everything, all of this like this, then no, I'm sorry, you can't get into this club. And it's something that I had been wondering actually about people that have disabilities. So those that have invisible disabilities and those that have visible disabilities. So hiding in plain sight. So trans women that look the part, the one that was like, oh, wow, they're trans, like I would have no idea. And them being comparable to those that have invisible disabilities. Now, in both of these instances, you have the issue of disclosure. When do I actually tell you that I'm disabled? And when do I actually tell you that I'm trans? But for trans people that don't, quote unquote, look the part, and disabled people that are visibly disabled, you know it from the jump. So are you with it or not? Like, I don't even have any room for any negotiation, any navigation. Be like, you're disabled. That's a man. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's no ability to, not that you want to hide in plain sight, but it's like this option has been removed for you because of the way you look.
And even one of the reasons why when me and Kim talked and we stayed on the phone for so fucking long is because as we kept talking, everything, there were so many parallels that just busted up and out. And it didn't matter. Like when I used to think in thinking about this, I was like, well, the difference would be is that trans women, it's almost like on our side, it's a built-in religious, we're supposed to hate you because you are going against God. You are going against nature. And on the disabled side, it's almost like,
poor you,
we're supposed to feel sorry for you. We're supposed to, this is not your fault. And da-da-da-da-da-da. But the outcome is still exactly the same.
Yeah. And actually, just to clarify, based on white supremacy and enslavement, in some instances, especially in Black communities, disability is seen as something to be reviled because it's based on religion. Religion makes it something that demons have brought on. That means like, you're a curse for my family. You've come into the family to ruin it. You're letting, those kinds of things. So there is sometimes direct animosity towards disabled people within families, which even ends up in their fatality, right? The deaths of disabled people, whether it's at birth or whether it's later down the line due to neglect, or whether it's actual murder. And the murder will never get reported in the same way that...
And it won't be called murder, by the way.
It won't be called murder, no. And it will never be something that is frowned upon because you are a cur for the most part, or you shouldn't exist to begin with, right?
And even in dismantling that in my mind and learning and having conversations with other disabled people, because for me, this was my blind spot, but it was a conversation that I needed to have. So I didn't feel like it broke whatever was in me that was blind to it. Like, because I was trans, that my transness was like, it's so on the front. Everybody is talking about my transness. Everybody, it's all, so I didn't have time to think about disabled situations in a way to relate to it, because my situation is so dire. I'm homeless. People are firing me. I didn't really think about it until I'm in a stable position and I'm really literally engaging with disabled people, like, oh, these are the parallels to them. This is what's going on. This is what we, what we overlap. So for me, having that experience broke whatever, not broke. I didn't have a hate. I didn't have nothing like that. It was just a blindness. It was just like, I'm so busy worried about what I'm going through with this trans shit that I didn't even have time to look around me to see who else had some overlapping things in my life.
Do you think that applies?
Well, it's because, and I feel
men
both sides, your life are so often on the line. So it's just kind of like, it's not that I don't want to think about you. It's like, I'm just so focused on staying alive another day because both of our lives are precarious at best.
Right.
Yeah. And I was going to say, do you think that that same kind of, I don't know, positioning applies to non-disabled, non-trans, Black, cis people?
Yes.
Do you think
when they're
that's
so
where
worried
they are
about
as
their
well?
own thing? Absolutely. And I also think, yes, they're so oppressed in their situations in different ways, but that they're always in this constant of oppression Olympics.
Jostling for position, yeah.
But that's also another reason why I think white women and Black men work so well together socially, because their issues complement each other so well. You get privileged for being a male, but you get wore out for being Black. You get privileged for being white, but you get wore out for being female. So come together, y'all balance each other out. She kissing your ass because she want to treat you like a Black king and not be racist. You're kissing her ass because she's set up to treat you like a king.
Yeah. And social capital. Isn't it Bell Hooks that was talking about this in her book about the way in which Black men's status could be elevated by a Black woman, but white men's status could never be Black men's status could be elevated by a white woman, but a Black woman's status cannot be elevated by a white man, based on the hierarchical structure of the society and where Black women have been positioned.
No. I think you're saying Black men's status can be uplifted by a white woman, but white man being with a Black woman does not uplift his status.
No, it reduces it. Yeah. And that in itself kind of explains a lot of, if we're just focusing, I'm not going to talk about Black men because that's another can of worms, but if we're just talking about Black women, that positioning of constantly being on the back foot and constantly being at the bottom and suffocating and constantly suffocating and fighting and being on your last leg can allow people to be in a place where they are so focused on the lack of vision that you have from being underneath everyone, right? You can't see anything else for the most part. Like if everyone is standing on you and you're facing the ground, like you don't really have the room to even
breathe.
And so, and you don't have the room to breathe or think. And so at the beginning I said to you, like, I felt like these people should know better. I was like, we should know better. But at the same time, I understand in the sense of, based on your positioning, like as far as you're concerned, you're at world's end. This is where we talk about world's end. That's where you are, and that's where you're positioned. You're standing on the edge of the cliff. It's not possible for anyone else to be behind you. You wouldn't think to look down to people hanging onto the edge of the cliff because you're standing on the edge of the cliff, trying not to get pushed over, right? Yeah. And so it's like trans women, disabled women, non-binary people, like we're all we're all there on the actual cliff edge, like, oh no, please, we're trying to hold on.
What I will say, following on from your point, Kim, is I think you're absolutely right, purely because I've been disabled for practically all of my life since before my first birthday. And so much of my energy was focused on my disability. So I was trying as hard as I possibly could to minimize it, be as funny as I could be as charming as I could be as interesting as I could be, so people aren't focusing on this disability. And all I ever wanted to be, talking about like a vision, was like the Black women that could walk. Because they actually, for me, being a young disabled Black girl, becoming a young disabled Black woman, it's like, oh, that is it. Like, once I get this, once I can move through life without the crutches and I don't need the mobility aids and I can just shed off this disability, which, society has told me, it's like, this is wrong, this is bad, whatever. that's what I always looked to. So I could never quite understand it when I was younger, that Black women would, non-visibly disabled Black women would say how difficult it was for them. I was like, you are what I'm trying to be. You are what I'm trying to emulate. And then when I got older, I'm like, oh, so everybody shits on you. But then it just made me realize that they're not even thinking about me.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm.
And I think for me, that is what woke is to me. When I was woke is when I was able to look around me and say, who can I ally with that has overlap that we can help each other get up out of this shit? When I started to do that, my life changed. When I started to look around me and say, who has some overlap with me? How can we work this out together? Who has some resources that I can use? How can I take my resources and help this person? Because that's the only way you're going to get out of this stuff, is by actually working with the people.
And reaching across, not trying to
working across,
yourself out.
Doing the whole wait in line stuff, that does not work. It has not worked. We know this does not work. We know, because once a person get in, once they told you to wait, they forget about you. They
close and lock the door. They close and lock the door.
Because they don't want to compromise their new land,
lock
right?
the door and say, well, I got through because I did this, this, and this. You need to do this and this and this. All the respectability politics and all that kind of stuff. That does not work. Toni Morrison also said, I'm glad, she is one of my favorite people. She is, my idol. She also said in an interview, she was like, I am not going to compromise anything about me. I am not going to I deserve it all. I want everything to go through the door. I'm going to go through the door with everything. I'm not going to water down my gender. I'm not going to water down my race. I'm going to be everything because I deserve it. Listen.
Of course, right? Absolutely. But I'm not going to give up one drop of melanin in order to get there. I'm not going to erase my race or my gender to get there. I want all of it. I deserve all of it, and we all do. I don't want to be blanded, bleached out in order to participate in this country and walk any hall of power or corridor that I want to. If I'm not good enough, if I'm not smart enough, then that's it. I'll take that here. Judge me by my dignity. That's not it.
Yes.
I feel like crying. Yes.
I'm gonna come my Black trans ass woman into the door with everything. I want it all because we deserve it. We are human. There's no reason that I have to wait. We all can get there. I hate operating from a place of scarcity. We need to operate from a place of abundance. There is enough money. There is enough resources that if the people with it dispersed it, it would be great. We deserve it. We have built a lot of these countries that we are living in. We are on our backs, built it through our legs as cis women. It's just what it is. We deserve every single thing, and we don't need to cut it. We don't need to wait. We deserve it. Give it to us now. And that's just me. I'm not going to wait. I know that I cannot get where I need to be without bringing people with me. I cannot get where I need to be without somebody pulling me and me pulling somebody. I know that I have to do this, and that's what I'm dedicated. And that's what I'm dedicated to. And that's what, to me, what being woke is. Like whatever the definition of woke is. For me, that's what it is. It's knowing, not only seeing the dismantling, not only seeing the system and knowing how the system is oppressing me, but also how can we work together so it cannot oppress everybody around me, including myself.
Thank you. Amen.
Yeah.
Diamond for president.
I share.
Listen, no, but it's
got our vote.
True.
Got our vote.
Yeah, no, it's true. I'm so grateful for this conversation because I feel like every time I listen to you, every time, even when I speak to you, like I learn so much and I grow so much, and it also validates my experience and my viewpoint, because I think there is a faction of woke society that is not as broad-minded and all-encompassing as I think we need to be. We're not as focused on the collective as we say we are. We're not as inclusive as we say we are. And there is this, as you said, operating from a point of scarcity as opposed from a point of abundance. And actually this is all ours. All we're doing is, you know, writing our names on it. It's like, it's not a case of, oh, we now need to go and build and create things. No, we are a multitude, we are a legion. And so it's always beautiful to hear someone say, no, this is what is possible and this is what should be happening. I'm not supposed to be excluded. I'm not supposed to be in a position where, you know, I am having to assert my humanity or anything like that. Like and it is all of our fight, and we are all in the same fight. It's not different fights we're having. And sometimes I think it feels like we're all having different fights, and we're fighting, there's this big system, we're all fighting different things. And it's like, no, it's all one fight. This is, the trans issues, it's our fight. Disabled issues, it's our fight. Non-binary issues, it's our fight. Homelessness issues, it's our fight. Like, all of these fights are our fight. And if we don't see it like that, then nothing can change. Like, the system can't be rewritten to the exclusion of those that it's actually harming the most. Like, then you're just rebuilding the same system. You're just photocopying it and painting it a different color. Yeah. And it's like, no, we can't live like, so it's so empowering to hear you speak. And one of the things that I think always, I guess, empowers me is when I hear people from different perspectives, acknowledging perspectives beyond their own and seeing them as equally important. And I think voices like yours are voices that allow me to know that the world that we are trying to create, even as triple cripples, like meeting Jay as well allowed me to be like, oh, so it's not like a weird departure from sanity. Like, it's something that is very much rooted in what is possible for humanity and what is possible for us as the world majority. Like, this isn't the thing we're envisioning, although we haven't experienced it in our lifetime. It exists somewhere within us, which is why we're trying to create it, right? And
thinking, and giving yourself room to think outside the box. One of my colleagues that I really, really admire, her name is Aria Saeed, and she's the executive director of the Transcultural District in San Francisco. We were having a conversation maybe like 3 days ago, 1 o'clock in the morning, just kicking, and we were talking about a situation where one of our younger friends is creating this housing program, and she wants to create this transitional living housing program for trans folks, right? And so what we were trying to explain to her, they have an opportunity to give trans folks housing. And the girl was like, but I don't even have a house. And she was like, I want people to be able to work for these houses. And we're like, no, we want you to think outside of the box. You said that you wanted to create a system where folks have housing. Yeah. If you create an institution like transitional living housing, that institution only thrives if homeless people exist. So you're going to always have an interest for homeless people existing. You're not going to have an interest in dismantling that, because then your institution won't exist. But if you give them housing, you raise enough funds to give 7 trans people housing. Boom, 7 people are off the street and they got their own house. Boom, let's fundraise again. Boom, 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 boom. Boom. We didn't do as good as last time, but we can get 3 people housing. That is 10 people in total that you just got houses to live in. And what you did, and if you continue to do that work and train other organizers to continue to do that work when you die, eventually you're going to have so many trans people with housing that you can say, boom, here we go. And so you have to really give yourself room. If you're out here doing the work, you have to give yourself room to make sure that to make mistakes, and also have people who can talk you through solutions, because you don't want to recreate stuff that just doesn't work. You don't want to recreate stuff that's not working. You really want to have the creativity to think outside the box and operate from a place of abundance. Because if you can raise $1 million for this particular thing, you can raise another $1 million. Think about that. Think about what you can do that is outside the box, that is not repeating a system that is already there. Like, you have to be more creative. We have to be more expansive of how we think in regards to the social justice situation. We are defunding the police is a start. It is not. It is
not the
no.
end.
It's not like, oh, we're letting all the prisoners out of the jail because we're abolishing. No, we are starting a movement, and just sitting still and not doing anything doesn't fix the system. You have to take steps, even if they baby steps. Be willing to make mistakes and figure stuff out, and give your community grace. Give your community the grace to make these mistakes and fix them. It's not going to happen in one day. It's not going to happen in a year. You got to train people to come up behind you, because honey, you're not going to live forever. So you got to train people to come up behind you to continue your work, but also understand that this is a process. This is a process. Give people grace and understand to think outside of the box so that we can make it happen. Because it's not going to happen just us sitting and, worrying about, oh, well, what if this? Well, no.
I trying to have viable business models.
Right.
Yeah, but I think like you both touched on something that's really important. And Diamond, you mentioned thinking outside of the box. And this is something we certainly say all the time as the Triple Cripples. Like, the greatest teachers, the place that encapsulate and houses the most knowledge are those that have so often been marginalized, those that have been left to the side. So the only way that we can actually think outside of the box, we need to actually consult those that we have put outside of the box. Those that are queer, those that are disabled, those that are fat, those that are dark-skinned, those that living lives in ways that completely go against these capitalist white supremacist views. Because for somebody that is inside the box, that is living their life in the ways, and maybe not in all of the ways, but in some of the ways that white supremacy says, yes, okay, you're allowed to continue. I can't think that far. But if you have a queer person out on the street experiencing right now the reality of homelessness, they will blow your mind with the ideas that they might have. It's like, it seems like such a novel idea. Like, if somebody's homeless, give them a home. But if you're working within the system, it's like, okay, so now how are they actually going to earn this home? How are they going to raise the value, raise the capital?
That's raise your bootstrapped up politics.
Exactly. And it's not because, like Malcolm X, Martin Luther King said, like, how dare you ask somebody to raise themselves up by their bootstraps when they have no fucking boots? Do you get what I mean? So it's from outside of the box, it's from the very outskirts, it's from the very margins that we will learn the greatest lessons, because our very lives are dependent upon these lessons being enacted right fucking now.
Yeah. And on that note, I want to thank Diamond for being here. I want to thank you, Jumoke, as well. This has been illuminating, and I really want us to do it again, and this time talk about like dating specifically, because I feel like there are so many stories.
I enjoy.
Yeah, and Diamond, you have another interview, so I want you to be able to go and get a toilet break and all of that stuff before you have to go into the next talk.
Hey, what's up? This is your girl Diamond. I am Diamond Stylz. I'm the host of Marsha's Plate and the executive director of Black Trans Women's Inc. You can find me on all social media platforms under Diamond Stylz. That is Diamond, DIAMOND, Stylz, STYLZ as in zebra. And I'm everywhere. YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, probably your daddy house.
Tell him I said hey.
Perfect. Diamond, thank you so much for making the time today. I hope this has been as edifying for you as it has been for us. And we're very grateful for you making the time.
So nice to meet you, Diamond.
Yeah, it's nice to meet you too. I had a great time.
Good. We love you, and carry that love with you into the week.
Thank you, darling.
Bye. Bye.